What if your biggest fear wasn't being hated, but instead it was being invisible? And what if the ache wasn't that no one rejected you per se, but that no one ever even considered you in the first place? Today's episode is about that pain, about it's about the emotional collapse that happens when you're always the one who's unchosen, not once, not twice, but over and over again. Romantic rejection is not just a part of life. It can become a pattern. And when it does, it starts to tell a story. A story that says, I am unwanted, I am unworthy, I'm nothing. So today we're going to explore what happens to the heart and the body and the identity of those who never get picked. We'll talk about why sexual shame is so heavy for men, and how rejection can become one's identity. Why dating apps quietly like reinforce emotional hierarchies of sorts, and how to rebuild your dignity through integrity and intimacy and not performance. But let's start off talking about the invisible rejection. You see, rejection is usually loud, right? A breakup, a ghosting, a harsh comment. But what if the worst kind of rejection is silence? Like no messages, no matches, no interests, no proof that you're desirable. This is romantic invisibility, and it's one of the most corrosive emotional experiences like a human can endure. See, here's what happens. You start seeing yourself through the absence of desire from others. And you don't just feel rejected, you feel erased, right? And so you start to believe there's something fundamentally wrong with you. And when this happens for years, I mean, like when rejection happens for years, it becomes a part of your identity, doesn't it? And so this moves into like what we call the shame loop, right? Here's how the shame loop works. So you start off with hope, and you say something like, maybe this time someone will see me. But then that hope moves to disappointment, where you're saying, still nothing. And so you start interpreting this experience, and you say, there must be something wrong with me. And then this usually moves into suppression, where you say, I'll pretend that I don't care, which of course goes into resentment when you say, why do they get the love and I don't? So you have collapse or explosion at this point. And you say, forget it, I'm just going to disappear or destroy, depending on which way you go. And this loop can replay hundreds of times without anyone noticing, because it's private, right? It's unspoken, it's inside, it's shame that's buried under the silence. And for men, the shame often gets masked as sarcasm, or as dismissiveness, or a disdain for women, or even a mockery of emotions. And it's not because they're cruel, but it's because it's the only armor that they were given. Let's talk a little bit about the dating apps and disability metrics and and emotional rankings. See, swipe-based platforms promise access, right? But often what they deliver is hierarchies of looks, of wealth, of status, if you will. And this creates an invisible ranking system, right? Some are hyper invisible, and some are semi-desirable, right? Some are digitally erased, but men on the lowest tiers, we get very few matches, right? And the message becomes, you are not wanted. But here's the danger. They don't just feel unwanted romantically. They start to believe they are socially irrelevant. Desirability becomes destiny, and from that comes despair. See, this isn't just a technology problem. It's really at the heart of it a worth problem, right? And here's where we start seeing the body as a burden. You see, when rejection is chronic, it doesn't stay in the mind. Instead, it settles into the body. Your shoulders begin to tighten. You avoid eye contact. Breathing remains shallow, and movements become minimized. And the body internalizes the message that I'm not supposed to take up any space here. So men begin to hate how they look, like their face, their frame, their posture. They may obsess over the flaws that they see in themselves. And so they try to, what we call, looks max, or withdraw entirely. See, this is sexual shame. Not just about sex, but about being seen, about being chosen, really about being enough. And it is grief that has nowhere to go, and grief that festers over time and eventually becomes resentment. But I want to offer an invitation back to dignity here. What do we do in such a place? Like, how do we build dignity again without performance, without chasing validation? Well, in my experience, it starts with integrity. Not the fake kind, not the being a nice guy so that someone will love me kind. No, I'm talking about real integrity, which for me is living in alignment with what you value, even when no one is watching, even when no one matches with you, even when you're alone, even when no one's clapping. Because your worth has nothing to do with who desires you, and it has everything to do with whether you show up in wholeness. And then second to integrity for me is intimacy. This is where intimacy comes in. And here's the truth. Intimacy isn't earned. Instead, it's offered. Not as a transaction, but as a sacred risk. You don't deserve intimacy when you hit a goal. Instead, you open to it when you become emotionally safe. So let me end with this. Romantic rejection is not just about being alone. No, it's about It's about the fear that you'll always be alone, that you were born undesirable, that nothing you do will ever be enough. But dear listener, that's not the truth. I think that's trauma. And while trauma can feel final, trauma can also be healed. So if you're listening to this, I want to leave you with a reminder, and that is, your pain is valid, your dignity is still intact, and your story is far from over. You've been told no one wants you, but maybe you haven't, maybe you just haven't been seen yet. So tomorrow we're going to go deeper into that. Join me then.